first tutorial. And so welcome on board. It's a real pleasure to be with you this afternoon. If you hear some background music, it's carnival time in Trinidad. So my office is very close to the Queen's Park Savannah, for those of you who understand the geography of that. And there's a big music truck passing really close by. It's also election season. And so one of our political parties seems to be having a rally in the area. So please bear with me. I hope the music is not too loud and doesn't affect what we're doing this afternoon or this evening. So yes, this session is focused on building capacity for writing proposals, grant proposals, business proposals, anything that you can say would help to advance the creative sector and creative entrepreneurs in terms of attracting resources, because ultimately that's what it's all about. So in effect, it's not too dissimilar from a business plan construct. And in that regard, one of the key benefits of doing such a thing is not just attracting resources, but developing an understanding, or what I call a self-awareness of your business, your operations, and also your market or clients. So this is a really important process. I can say to you, I've been doing this for, I think, more than 2 decades now with creative or cultural entrepreneurs, and developing this skill. I call it a skill because in effect, that's what it is probably one of the most important skills to develop. Because otherwise, you're never quite sure, what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and for whom are you doing it. So all of these things tend to be clarified through this proposal writing process, but also through this business planning process, if we view it from a wider standpoint. So I think one of the key things that we like to do in sessions like this is get people to identify themselves very quickly, so we know who's in the room, and it's important because many of you have a high level of expertise and experience in the sector, and so we'd want to draw on that as we proceed. And so it's a collective effort from that standpoint as well. So can I get you guys to, to start this, giving a brief synopsis of who you are, where you're located, and so on. Who wants to go first? And if you could put on your camera, that'd be great. If not, we'll excuse you, but we like to see your face as well, if possible.
I'll go first if that's all right.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yes, my name is Benjamin Henry. I'm an attorney at law, but in my capacity here in this meeting today, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Film and Television Association. An association, in effect, functions as a professional association looking out for the benefit of all of the film practitioners here on island in Barbados, as the name suggests. So I applied for this meeting, applied for this course rather, with the BFTA and in essence, everyone that comes under our remit in mind.
Okay.
So I look forward to the session here today.
Excellent. Thanks, Benjamin. Thanks for going first. Yeah.
I'll go ahead. My name is Catherine Tafari. I am a St. Lucian by marriage. I've been in the Caribbean since 1994. My children were raised here. in St. Lucia. I moved to Barbados in 2007. I am a visual artist, a writer, a poet. In Barbados, I became very involved in the spoken word community. I had a nonprofit there for the development of spoken word artists, which was a very wonderful collaborative experience. And I have now moved back to St. Lucia to stay, to retire eventually when I'm not ready to retire yet. And I would really like to work. I've left my project management job in Barbados, and I'm not retired, but I'm now looking for maybe setting up a nonprofit so that I could do some things that would be of benefit to the creative sector in St. Lucia as my next career path.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Catherine. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Rachel Collimo. Unfortunately, I can't put on my camera today. I am a publicist, marketing professional, intellectual property trainer and consultant from Trinidad and Tobago. I have been working in the creative industries for over 15 years. Through my first initiative with a nonprofit I founded, Poetic Vibes Arts Foundation, and also as a member of the Circle of Poets of Trinidad and Tobago, of which I held various positions and currently sit on the Circle's board. I've worked with other nonprofit organizations as well, and I currently run a business focusing on creative industries and MSMEs. So I'm here to expand my knowledge of this area and to add value to what I do currently.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi,
How are
Dr.
you?
Liz.
Yeah,
Fine, thank you.
thanks for coming on board.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Who's next?
Hi, my name is Penny Hawahazi. I am from Barbados, but I live in Jamaica. I work with the University of Commonwealth Caribbean at their Small Business Development Center. I'm the director for their Small Business Development Center. So that means that we're constantly helping persons to, entrepreneurs to develop out their businesses. We're always being, a lot of artists and creators are also reaching out to us, and we're also thinking of creating a tourism cluster as well. So because of all of that, and we're always writing grants, I decided, you know what, let me increase my skills, as you said, in grant writing. So yes, we do some grants, but I'm not normally the one that write these grants. So I want to get into the, just get into that feel and understand and be able to create one that would be helpful for the creatives in Jamaica.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Daniela. I think it was back in 2019 when I'd done this more, it was a 4-part series on grant writing for the Caribbean Development Bank, which included some like 4 videos, and I did 4 course outlines, a 4-part course outline. So that's far more, involved than what we're doing in this session and the next session. But you'll get a fairly good idea of what the core principles are. So yeah. So thanks for coming on board.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Anika Plowder in Quarantine. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm the founder and creative director of an NGO. It's called Chosen Hands. We use art as a means of self-expression. Our target group started off being at risk of vulnerable youth. We use it to help them to self-express and also to infuse a mentorship program where they can see persons in society who have transitioned through difficulty, and those persons were able to sow. But we use art as that vehicle to break down difficult narratives with youth.
Okay. Great. Thanks very much, Anika. Next.
I'll perhaps go next. Arlene Hallman is the name. And by profession, I am a marketing, or I say executive marketing consultant. Um, I've been doing marketing for over 20, 25 years. And sort of coming out of the corporate space, I have a company as well, my own communications company. And over the years, while I've worked in corporate, I've worked in government and also in the entertainment and the arts sector. I do a lot of festival marketing, which I'm really very passionate about, and also love the creative space. I'm an artist as well. And through my company, Sunbeam Communications, I have a podcast. I also recently founded a empowerment group for women where we sort of bring together corporate women, professionals, and the creatives as well. So in terms of this course, I thought it would be useful to, add to my, arsenal in terms of what I do, but also to look the ways that I suppose I can get funding and support for the initiatives, especially the group of women that I've recently started.
Okay. Perfect. Have we met, Arlene? I can't remember.
Yes, we have, Dr.
Okay.
Nurse. The Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the
Okay.
Arts.
All right. Yes, yes.
The advisor.
Of course,
Yes.
of course. Yes.
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Next, please.
Good afternoon. Am I the
Afternoon.
last person?
No, there are quite a few after you, I think.
Okay,
But
thank
go
you so
brief.
much. All right. I'm Ronalda Piraman of Yame Wanitana Peoples. We are an indigenous community in Jamaica. I hold the position of chieftainess and also secretary of our nonprofit organization. I've been a part of 2 grants, but I've never participated in the writing or the creation of the grant. And so usually my community and I were like the beneficiary, the end user of the project. So I am, more than looking forward to learning how to write these grants, because the grants that we're a part of, they're international. And so I realized that it's not the same when we're doing it from a local perspective. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot more and be able to create my own. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for sharing that. Yeah. Okay.
Alat Lazoya from Trinidad and Tobago. Hi, Dr. Nurse.
Hi.
Just meet everywhere all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
I am the marketing and media manager for the Bocas Lit Fest. So we're preparing for a festival right now, and it is a literary NGO, the largest in the English-speaking Caribbean. And I also have my own company that assists creatives with communication strategies, and I found myself falling into serving NGOs quite often. So I've worked with PAHO, who I've worked with the Pan American Development Foundation. I am also a part of a team that assists NGOs internationally. So I'm also assisting an NGO in Africa at the moment. And in every single one of these, and also the Trinidad and Tobago Non-Communicable Diseases Alliance. And that's a lot to say, but that's what it is. And I am also the president of the National Dance Association of Trinidad and Tobago. So if anybody had any thoughts about altruism and my life, there you go, right? So, but being in this space means that I've been on the end of executing on projects, but because I'm the president of the National Dance Association, I now have to lead a team, and we now have to source funding and not depend on the government alone. So aside from this being a skill that I've always wanted to learn, because I like just to be able to do something if things are, if we're under-resourced, it's critical for me at this point because I have a term to complete, and this has never been something that has actively been done under the association. So I want to get us into a good footing where we're not dependent on the local government or, handouts that everybody's competing for here. So I'm really looking forward to learning a lot.
Okay, thanks very much, Alet. Yeah. Aren't we all trying to do that? You know, it's a really important skill, is a really for almost self-preservation,
Mhm.
but also for self-identity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
So, anyone else?
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Alicia Psyche-Haynes. I am the Curriculum Officer for Drama and Dance in Tobago of Trinidad and Tobago. And my purpose in being here in this particular program is to develop and learn the skill of proposal writing. I see it as me being able to assist my teachers with respect for resources, for teaching resources, because right now we're in the middle of trying to build out an online platform for teaching resources. So being able to develop this particular skill allows me to be able to tap into the resources that are available for us to be able to get the funding and stuff for that particular project. And wherever else that we can find that need and fill it with respect to proposal writing. So that's me generally in a nutshell.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Why is it that I can't? I don't know what's going on.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chantal Curtis. I live in the Bahamas. I work with an organization called the Bahamas National Trust, which is a nonprofit organization. And so my purpose of being in this particular course is to be able to develop the skills in proposal writing. Like some of my colleagues before me, they've indicated that they've been on the executing end of projects likewise. And so I would like to be able to participate in the process from start to finish. And so I look forward to the knowledge and skills that I would develop through this experience.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Anyone else? I think we're only halfway through the list. I see 20 people, and so was that 22? That includes Marielle and myself, probably one other person, so there must be at least 19 people.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy Linton. I am from Barbados. I write business plans and proposals for a living, and I have noticed that the various development agencies always have their own criteria for plans and proposals. So my objective is to get in here and learn about what the CDB and the CIIF requires, so that I'm in a position to help any creatives which may cross my path. I like to think I'm a bit of a creative as well. I have 2 self-published books, children's books. I like to work with children. So if there are any opportunities from that area as well, I'm just here to see what's possible and learn as much as I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Stacey. Anyone else? I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 11 people so far. There must be another 8 people.
It's so horrible.
No one takers? You're the one that call you all out, right?
I'll go.
I'll
I'll
go.
go. Hold one second.
I've
I've
been
been
having
having
some
some
trouble
trouble
connecting
connecting
with
with
my
my
phone,
phone,
so I
so
had
I
to
had to
get on
get
my
on my
laptop.
laptop.
So
So
if
if
you
you
see
see
Latoya
Latoya
Oliver,
Oliver,
is
is
no
no
sign that
sign that
that's
that's
Tahira
Tahira
Paul.
Paul.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
so
so
just give me
give me
1
1
second. Let me
second. Let me
just
just
disconnect.
disconnect.
All right. Who wants to talk quickly while we wait for Latoya?
Okay, I'll go. Hello, I'm Abina Vincent from Grenada, and I am a teacher, theater arts teacher, and English teacher. Also, I am the founder and creative director of the Labe Theater Company, Inc. And I choose to do this course because I pretty much do not have much of a background or much of like knowledge on proposal writing. So I'd really like to expand on that and learn more about it so that I can be in a better place, a better position to help the company and also to help. I also teach English as a foreign language through theater and play to students in Europe and South America. So I also would like to use that skill also to help me to be in a better position to get funding and so on to develop my company and develop whatever projects I plan to do or embark on. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rubina.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tahira Paul, not Latoya Olivier, and I am from the Trial State of Grenada. If you know Grenada, Carriacou, Pitimatic, I'm from the smallest of NIC. I work with various creatives. I work with, groups that like we host festivals and so forth. Are you guys hearing me?
Yes, we
Oh my
can.
God.
I'm hearing you.
Hello?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Right. And recently I did a stint at Afrexim Bank in Egypt, and I realized that creatives, it's a huge thing in the multilateral arena, especially in the banking arena, right? So I saw it fit to do this course to enhance my skills in writing grants and proposals to see how I can better assist my community, my country overall, in accessing finance in that area. So that's why I'm here. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Lord Prince. I am from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This is all very new to me. I'm mostly here for the learning experience. I would like to tap into the world of writing proposals and grants. So this is all a learning experience for me and trying to be more creative. Nice to meet everyone.
Pleasure. It's a learning experience for all of us. So welcome on board.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome everyone to your tutorial session. This is a really important occasion for this proposal writing for the cultural and creative industries hosted by CDB Ciif. Synapse Zone is the platform that is being used to host this course, and it is a pilot to enable, greater usage and coverage of a greater access to resources by creatives. And so we are delighted to welcome you. We're delighted to bring this opportunity to you with the hope that you can not only learn from the course materials, but it will be an opportunity for peer learning, peer-to-peer learning and connection. Because one of the key aspects of one of the best practices for the creative industries is collaboration. And it's something that in the Caribbean we don't do enough of for various reasons. And so this is an opportunity that we hope you'll take advantage of to connect with your peers who may be doing similar projects, who have similar values and approaches to the work, and that you can learn the bases for collaboration that this platform offers and this course offers simultaneously. So we are delighted to welcome you. Dr. Nurse is, of course, a leader in the industry. So this is an amazing opportunity for you to learn from him. And this course is structured for you to understand the different aspects of the creative industries and how you can really build upon the aspect to further enable your project. So thank you all for being here, and on to you, Dr. Nurse.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Marielle. Yeah, so we have we have you until 7:30, if I recall correctly. So we have about 2 hours, which is not a lot of time, but so we want to maximize on that time. And really, this engagement is a really short engagement. It's almost like rapid fire. And so the question is, or the question that I had to ask myself and answer was, what would be the core issue areas and building blocks that are needed for developing a proposal? So this is not a 12-week or 13-week course. This is really a 2-session intervention. Many of you have some significant experience, and that really is testimony to the quality of the work that you are doing and the varied work. I mean, I'm quite amazed and blown away by the kind of things people are doing. So kudos to you in that regard. So I've been an academic for most of my professional career, but I've also been an entrepreneur in the creative sector in multiple businesses. And I've also worked with many of the international agencies in helping them to define approaches to the creative sector and other sectors, because I've done work in other sectors like agriculture, tourism, manufacturing. So a lot of people know me in relation to creative industries, but I do work in a lot of other sectors as well. And I can say that one of the sectors that has, I would call it almost a challenge, is this creative sector. And for a number of reasons. So earlier today, I was interviewed by a journalist from the Business Guardian. And it happens every year at this time. They write to me and ask me what are my perspectives on Trinidad Carnival and the economics of it, and so on. And one of the immediate big issues with Trinidad Carnival is that we have very little documentation and data. So outside of the number of visitors that arrive and how much they spend, we know not much else. And I indicated to the journalist that one of the challenges is that every couple of months, an entrepreneur contacts me and says, Dr. Nurse, do you have any data that you can share with me? I'm writing a business plan. And I have to write back and say, well, no, unfortunately. But I do try and help them with their business plan. Or students reach out to me and they say they want to work on a PhD thesis or a master's thesis. And in fact, one contacted me today, wanting me to supervise the project, and he indicates the project, and it's a commercially oriented project. And I said to him, what you're trying to do is a feasibility study. And I said, the question that I asked was, where are you going to get the data from? And of course, he didn't know. So one of the big challenges about this sector is availability of data. And the Caribbean has really become quite notorious now, so that there are countries that are even poorer than the Caribbean where you can get better data. So it's not a function of resources per se. It's really a function of political will, one can argue. And so that is a major bugbear that would apply to almost all of you guys. I've worked with people in all of the countries that are participating in this session today, at least based on the ones who've provided their names and their background. And then there's some sectors where you get a bit more data than others. So for example, anything to do with the performing arts, theater, drama, you name it, virtually no data. Music, maybe you'll get some data, film maybe a bit, books a bit, but areas like photography, some of the new areas like social media related. Again, the answer is no. So that's really one of the big challenges we have to overcome. So we have to think through how can we use data from other sources to create what we call in literature a proxy, so that we may not have the exact data for something, but we could use something else that is related, for which there's data, as a basis to illustrate the potential of a particular outcome, let's call it that. So that's a really one key important thing from the data side of things. And I'm saying starting there because any proposal or plan or feasibility study has to have evidence. This is an evidence-based process, so you need some data. You can also draw on data from other countries. Particularly, it would be particularly useful to draw on data from a country that is maybe similar size or similar structure, and so on. All right, so if you get data from another territory that looks like or has similar historical background to the one that you are operating from, then that's useful. So you can find a comparator, we would call that, or you can say that you are able to benchmark against a particular country. So again, this is another means by which we would overcome the data availability challenge. And then there's maybe a third important, let's call it, device or methodology. It is where you try to triangulate data. So for example, you want to capture data from multiple sources to, in effect, develop some verifiability about the data. So, okay, so let me give you an example, because I can think of an example off the top of my head, which is, I've often gone and asked, let's say, soca artists, so how much do you earn? They always think I'm going to go tell the tax man, so they'll always tell me less than what they earn. But what I do is I then go and ask the promoters, the impresarios, and the booking agents, how much do you pay soca artists? And they then tell me there are multiple tiers. So some artists are top tier, some are just below that. And so that in effect is a process by which you've triangulated the data. So one source tells you one thing, and another source, which is on the other side of the negotiating equation, tells you another thing. And between the two, you get the kernel of truth, or as close to it as possible. So that's a really important methodology. So I hope that that helps, all right? Because this is a really important part of the process. So that's just the introductory elements for now. I will try and slip to my slides. So please bear with me. Let me see if I can share. If the host can enable me to share. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. All right. Now, so to temper your enthusiasm or expectations, this is not a full-blown course, sort of like the one that Marielle and I developed way back in 2019. That's a bit more exhaustive. That had 4 major components, and we did 4 videos for that. So what I'm trying to do here in this short time is basically get what I'd call straight to the heart of the matter. Because often, not only am I on the receiving end of proposals, I also have to write proposals. So last week I had to write a proposal for one of the creative industries that I'm engaged with. We didn't have much time, so the CEO and I, we arranged to have dinner because we were both busy. The only time we could find time is when we were both eating. And so we sat down and we were like, okay, so how are we going to write this? And so I started off by doing what I do with all proposals. I start off by thinking, what are the key questions that we need to have answered? And often you start with what are the key questions that the agency that you're applying to would want to know. And I always summarize it in terms of 5 key questions, because beyond that, it gets a bit too long-winded, or, well, there are often 5 key questions. So what are those 5 key questions? Well, the first, and in effect, almost the most important questions is, what am I proposing? And the way I like to think about it is that it must be so crystal clear that you should be able to tell it to someone in less than 30 seconds. What we call an elevator pitch. If you can't articulate it in 30 seconds, you're dead in the water. So I could give you an example. In the early days when, because I'm the chairman of Caribbean Tales, for example, and we're a film distribution company. And I remember very well when we first started our incubator in Toronto, and we would go to all these parties after, all the film screenings and so on. And people would be drinking, having a good time and so on. And someone would come up to you and say, what are you into? What are you doing? What business are you in? Well, you have no more than 30 seconds to tell them what you're doing before they decide whether you are a good person to be chatting with or hanging out with. If you can't grab their attention in that short space of time, they're gone. On to the next person. So it's really important that you're able to cinch in 30 seconds or less what you're about. So it's the same I say the same thing to my PhD students. So I ask them, so what's the title of your PhD thesis? And if it starts running on like a sentence, I'm like, no, you don't have it sorted. It must have keywords and key terms that the people in the industry would understand. So if you're doing something in music, for example, or even theater, let me use theater, for example. So one of the participants said that they do stuff with either children or particular vulnerable communities. You need to have those key words in your pitch, straight up. And particularly if you're targeting international organizations, there's international organization speak. So you need to be able to craft your pitch in a framework that they would understand. So that's the most important thing. what am I proposing? So that gets you in the door. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will get to have more involved discussion or even any opportunity to propose or furthermore to negotiate. But getting in the door is in fact half the battle. Right. So the next slide. You've probably heard of this before, but it's referred to as SMART objectives. I can't begin to tell you how important this is. And I see it all the time. So if you look, for example, at the cultural policies that have been articulated and published by several Caribbean countries, they don't have any SMART objectives. What they have is a long laundry list of what I call wishful thinking, things that they would like to happen. But often when I go to engage with various ministries or agencies or even some of the NGOs, I ask, well, how are you going to get there? How are you going to get from where you are to where you want to be? Well, the first thing is you have to know where you are at. And then secondly, where you want to get to. And to do that, to move from where you are to where you want to be, and where you want to be could be defined as your preferred future, you need to be able to be specific. So, for example, you have a project, let's say it's theater, it's targeted at a particular vulnerable group. You may want, and I've been involved in theater myself. And for example, one project I was involved in, we were targeting secondary school students between the ages of 13, 14, and let's say 16, 17. And our goal was to target about 25% of the secondary schools in Trinidad and Tobago. There are quite a number of secondary schools in Trinidad and Tobago. So we recognize that given our capabilities, that was like 2 a week for most of the year. And so then we started working back the logistics. How much transport we need, how much gas money we need. Can everybody on our team go twice a week everywhere? No. So we needed to have a team that included, a fairly large group. And so when we started working out the specifics of it, we realized that, wow, we can't do 25%. We could probably do 10 to 15% of the schools. And so we adjusted our objectives in a specific way because we realized that we couldn't deliver on that bigger goal of 25%. And then measurable. So we started to do pretty well with this project, this kind of like theater in action program. And we started even charging money. We charged like $5 per student, which we would alert the schools to, and the schools agreed to. And so we had to then figure out, well, what kind of money we needed to ensure that we didn't run out of gas, literally. So we had to then start putting down elements of a budget. And so things had to be more measurable as we proceeded. Then the next area is actionable. So how are we going to make sure that we are able to deliver on the things that we are aiming for? And so you want to be as detailed as possible in terms of outlining that. So again, it comes back to some of the other indicators we're starting to use to measure our performance, but also our target market. And then relevance. So we had to ask ourselves again and again, are we doing something that our target market or audience was interested in? And the answer was, and became, quite well, because we were getting a lot of referrals. So the school teachers and even the principals were telling other school teachers and other principals in other schools to contact us. And so we realized that we had a certain relevance, but also the data that we were applying to what we were doing was able to show us, how we were building out a market, how we were increasing our participation rate, etc. And then any plan has to be time bound. So, for example, we used the annual calendar, but because we were targeting schools, we had to use the academic calendar. So when are schools in operation? Well, they close for the summer, they close on certain public holidays, they close for Christmas, they close for Easter. And once we started framing that out, we saw the points and time that we could execute our initiative. And so when you add up all of these so-called SMART objectives, it really brings into sharp focus and sharp relief what you can do. It really it makes all the difference once you start building that out. Then the next critical area is, who are the stakeholders? Well, your target market and your stakeholders. I would say that this tends to be the biggest problem, one of the biggest challenges that creatives have. There's an old adage, which is that if we make it, people will come. Well, that's not true. So there is a very well-resourced, space in Barbados that's set up as a cultural site, an attraction, and they were hoping to attract cruise ship tourists and others, even local tourists. And it never really came off the ground. It's a wonderful piece of property, great buildings, great artifacts and artworks, and it never really worked. I won't go through all the details of why it didn't work, but they started from a production standpoint, which is or supply push perspective. We have this space, we have these buildings, let's convert it into an art space. And it was like, okay, well, there's arts and heritage. They didn't ask the question, who are the target markets? Who are key stakeholders? And what do they want or need? So they didn't go ask the cruise ship operators or the bus drivers who move tourists around, or the taxi drivers, or the cultural fraternity in Barbados, or several others. They didn't do that. They didn't start with the demand, what I call the demand pull perspective. And that's a traditional mistake that not just in the creative sector, but in other sectors as well. So just because you have a resource does not mean, or a resource or a skill or capability, it does not mean that it is marketable. So you could be very good at it, amazing even. That does not necessarily mean that it is marketable. You have to start thinking, what is it that I'm good at that someone would be interested in. So you start with that framework and you work your way back. That's less risky conceptually than doing it the other way around. Because most creatives start from the supply push. I have this great talent. I'm going to make it work for me. Some people are lucky and do really well with it. Some people are very gifted. Some people have resources that can help them get over the hump. Most of us don't. And so you have to reframe it. Now, this is not to say that, and to address that concern often that people have, oh, maybe I'm selling out, I'm doing it for the money or something. And well, all artists have to be resourced, all artwork, all creativity. So you're trying to find a mechanism by which your work can be resourced, not only just from your own pocket and hard work or sweat equity, but building on other sources. And so this is why understanding a whole range of stakeholder relationships is important. So for example, who's your supplier of maybe particular critical goods or maybe services? And what would that person or entity's needs be? So maybe there's an opportunity there for you to do some cross-marketing, some cross-selling. And so that person might give you a discount or maybe become a sponsor. And in that way, you move away from just a narrow and traditional relationship into something that's broader and more effective or compelling. So again, so a supplier could become a sponsor. And who knows, maybe even a business partner. So that's a really useful way to look at it. And this is where the rubber starts to hit the ground. So how much will the project or initiative cost? You have to identify the resources, the budget. You also have to start thinking about what is the desired results. But I'll come to that in the next slide. And one of the things that I have found to be really important is that you have to be able to identify how much resources you are putting into the budget, into the initiative. Yes, maybe sweat equity, but you have to probably show a bit more than that to win over potential sponsors, funders, you name it. All right. So budgeting is a really important thing. And it's not just, and I've seen this very often, it's not just a list of what your expenses are or costs to be incurred. You also have to indicate where are your sources of revenue. If you cannot identify any sources of revenue, then you should probably pack up. It means this is a non-starter. Even for something that's not for profit. Okay. It's the same issue. So it's whether it's for profit or not for profit, the same thing applies. So even if you're running something for your local church, a church bazaar, or an event at a church, and it's really not to be making any profit per se, you have to generate at least a surplus to cover your expenses, one would argue. All right. So the budgeting process is absolutely critical. And often, when you do up your budget, it changes everything. You realize, wow, I really am thinking way ahead of myself, which is normal. Most of us are way too ambitious. And once you've done the budget, you probably have to go back into your proposal or your business plan and readjust everything else. Adjust your time frames, adjust your expectations, etc. Because the budget is the ultimate tool that decides or frames what you can and can't do. So, for example, when I meet with governments to talk about their creative sector and they show me their creative policies, the first question I ask is, where is the budget? And if there is no budget, I say to them, well, this is pie in the sky. It's not going to move. It's not going to have you're not going to have anything that's impactful because you haven't defined where the resources are going to come from or what are the resources you're going to generate. Right? So this is why this is so important at multiple levels. So at the macro level, at a government, but also at the micro level. And last but not least, it's the dreaded return on investment. Now, often people think it's a purely financial term. That's not true. You can utilize it for social innovation and social investments as well. And you can measure non-financial benefits. So for example, some of the projects that were identified when people were introducing themselves are non-for-profit activities. The impact you may be able to generate in a particular community is really important. So, for example, I'm the president of COSTAT. Last year, we started a program targeting the formerly incarcerated. And I mean, as a college, we don't make any money from this, no surplus. But we see it as part of our mission to impact on particular marginalized groups. And so this was a particular target group that we were interested in. We have a criminal justice program. And so we wanted to move from just training people in the protective services and talking and writing about dealing with the problems in the criminal justice system to actually doing something. So when we write proposals in this area, we talk about the social good, social impact, and we are able to document it. So how many participants, where they're coming from, but more importantly, where are they going? Once we've trained them, what next? And so, for example, we've created an entrepreneurs club, and we also been able to, with one of our partners, create a career fair, but it's more than that. It's a career placement service for them, so they're actually getting jobs. So we use those as key metrics to measure our return on investment. Because I have to argue with my board. I have 3 members of staff who are putting in 25% of their time into this. Then, I can justify the investment on that basis. All right. So you see, so that's a very concrete example that I'm sharing there. So yes, it's nice to have grand dreams, but you also then have to figure out what are the returns that you're going to generate and how are you going to measure them and how are you going to communicate that back to your potential investor, collaborator, sponsor, you name it, because there are multiple ways in which you can show value of a particular project or initiative. Okay. So that's it for the grand thing. Those are the 5 key questions, if I could call them that. So I don't know if there are any questions or comments thus far. I can then move on to the next presentation where we get into the case studies, and we have 6 case studies, and we'll break you up into groups for it, but I'll talk a bit about the case studies first. So with any questions or comments, points for clarification? I'm all yours.
I do have a question. Could you elaborate a bit more on the impact, the last one, the ROI?
Mhm.
And could you give some examples?
All right. Well, I'll give you let's take a financial example. I'm an evaluator for a fund that gives money to medium entrepreneurs, particularly what we call innovation-driven enterprises, right? So we're looking for enterprises that are doing innovative things. And so I recall, so I'm not going to give specifics, of course, but we had one of the firms that was able to attract funding from this program was able to illustrate, one, there was a particular gap in the market for the particular product that they were producing, both at home and abroad. And they required a couple $100,000 to build out a production facility to do some rebranding, some marketing, and so on. Probably coming, and this is TT dollars, probably coming up to about $500,000 TT. But they were able to show that over the next 3 years, they were going to be able to generate income such that by a 3-year period, they would have generated sales 6 times what that initial investment was. So a 600% of return in sales relative to the investment, that's pretty good. Often though, agencies like the one I'm involved in go more granular. So they want to know, okay, so yes, you're going to generate more sales. That's great. But more than likely, you're also going to incur more expenses. You're going to have more staff, more equipment to run, more electricity. So you have to calculate everything. And what you're now starting to measure is what is the net return or net earnings. And that's what you're going to compare with the initial investment. So yes, you have a 600% growth in sales, right, relative to initial investment, but the cost went up significantly too. So it turns out that their return was probably over a 3-year period going to be closer to 250% of what the initial investment was. But that looked very compelling still, right? So that's what is required when you start drilling down onto return on investment. So what you want to be able to calculate is what is your net. So after you talk about your income, then you talk about your expenses, and then you net it off. And really, you want also, if it's a very commercial project, you should be generating a return that is better than putting the money in the bank. well, given the low interest rates these days, that's not so difficult. You want to be able to also say that, well, would it be better for me to take that $500,000 and buy real estate or go into this business venture? Real estate can generate good returns sometimes, but in most territories these days, it's pretty slow in terms of the real estate earnings. So again, and that's a really important thing to do, is to almost benchmark your expected return on investment to investments in other sectors or in other areas of business. That gives you, or that gives the person who's assessing your project some basis to do that benchmarking. And benchmarking is a very important tool. So, yeah, one of my colleagues made a presentation on something and was arguing that a particular area had a very low return on investment. And I said, okay, but what are you comparing it to? Are you comparing it to other sectors? And when she compared it to other sectors, it did a lot better than those other sectors. And so it changed the dialogue. So even though you could calculate it just for your project, you want to be able to draw on data from other arena to give what we call give perspective on this. So I hope that helps. That's useful.
Thank you very much, Doctor. It was.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Good afternoon, Dr. Norris. You said something earlier about, there's a old saying that is not true about if you build it, they will come. Are you suggesting or advocating that whenever you have an idea or a creative idea, that if you're deciding to offer it as a service to the community, that you should do research on the particular area before deciding to call it a business? Or what's the approach? What's the specific approach that you should have when doing something like this, especially because we have so many ideas in the career?
Okay. All right. So let me see if I can think of a good example to illustrate the point. Yeah, I think I was in Florida a couple of years ago. So this would have been, I think it's actually around COVID time. So it might have been 2021 or so, late 2021. And I'm in a bus with some colleagues and we were going from one university to the next. And there was this interesting radio program where they were talking about how businesses must identify the pain points of their clients. And I was like, pain points? I was like, I'd never thought of it in that way. And they gave 4 examples. One was actually a university. And in fact, I've actually trying to implement some of that right here at this college. And they talked about how the college reduced the number of hoops applicants had to go through before they could complete their application process and get registered, right? And they got out like a 35% growth in enrollment. So I was like, wow. Okay. But the example that struck me the most, which I think is the point I'm trying to get at here, is this. They give the example of a furniture company, and they made sofas in particular. They were pretty good at making sofas. And sofa sales were slow. And they did a survey and found out that most people want to change their sofas. and have no problem paying for the sofas which they had on offer. But they still weren't getting people to buy. And it turns out that the biggest problem that most people have with buying sofas is what to do with your old sofa. So what they did is, in their marketing, they said, if you buy a sofa from us, we'll take your old sofa away for free. Sales jumped incredibly. So, what's the moral of the story here? The moral of the story is, even if you're making good sofas, even if you have clients who are interested in your sofas, the sales may not happen. You have to figure out what is the thing that is blocking that person or that market from gravitating to your product or to your service. And that's what we mean by generating a demand-oriented framework, or what I call a demand pull framework, as opposed to just a supply push. Now, supply push has its uses, which is, for example, sometimes you are an artist, or let's say a visual artist, and you produce a fabulous piece of work and it gets picked up. All the art critics love it. Boom, off you go. Right? You're producing this out of your own sense of aesthetic, your own sense of what you want to say to the world. Boom, and it works out well. But most artists are able to sell their work well because they have a good manager or a gallery that is promoting their work. And that person does the connect with the market and does that demand-oriented work on behalf of the artist. So, yeah. So that's why what we're calling for is both a nuanced approach, but also a balanced approach, meaning that it can't just be all supply push. You have to take into account this demand side. And what I learned from that radio program was identifying where are the pain points for something. And it happens to all of us in life, It's like, I have the money to buy this thing. I need it. But why am I not getting off my chair and go get it? Yeah. All right. So you have to think through some of those issues from this standpoint of the consumer or the final entity that's going to be using the product or service, or even the intermediaries. Because in many industries, there are lots of gatekeepers that restrict your access to the market. So that's a really important part of the equation as well. I hope that was useful.
Okay. Thank you.
Any others? If there are none, I can see if I can flip to the other presentation. I mean, what was really amazing about hearing from you guys is the diversity in work that you're doing, the multiple sectors and the multiple initiatives. And the creative industries are no longer what it used to be. 10 years ago, the world was a very different place. Right? I think last week was the 20th anniversary of YouTube. Facebook is probably going to be 20 years old in a few years from now. the social media network has transformed the creative sector, the digital platforms. And now we have AI to contend with in a major way as well. So, yeah. So we all have to now figure out how to utilize all of these tools to our advantage rather than allowing these tools to take our work away from us. So I hope everybody's ready. Let me get to the next slide. Okay, so when Mariel asked me to do this and given this short time frame, I was like, okay, how can I summarize this process of the proposal writing? Now, if you could go online and there's no shortage of things online on how to write a business proposal. No shortage. Even for the creative sector. So you can bolster whatever I'm saying by going and looking at what the literature says and so on. So, so you're not restricted to just learning from this source. And that's the advantage of the internet and all of that. I mean, there's no real excuse for not knowing something anymore. What you have to learn to do is ask the right question. If you don't know the right question to ask, you are still none the wiser. So there's a learning process that needs to be embedded even when engaging with these knowledge platforms. So the way in which I have identified a way to summarize this proposal writing process is in these 4 dimensions. 1, identifying the case. The case, project, the initiative. You have to describe it as best as possible. So, yeah, if you aren't able to do that, and this is first base, you're out of the water. You really can't proceed. So, defining what is the case. So, what was really interesting is that for almost all of you, you mentioned 3 to 4 things that you are doing. In some instances, they linked, and in some instances, they're not. So you have to figure out what is the case, the project, the initiative that you are pursuing. And so the case is really important. The second is the context stroke opportunity. So, okay, let me give you an example. And as an example from today. Today was the launch of a training initiative called Healthcare Training that the college, where I'm president, that's being funded by the Ministry of Youth and National Service, and in partnership with the Ministry of Health. So my colleagues wrote something for me to say in my remarks. When I'm reading it before going up on stage, I realize they didn't identify the context or the opportunity. So why do we want to train people in healthcare, young people in healthcare? Right? Personal care assistant, emergency, medical training. Why? So I get up on stage and I say, the context is that the health and wellness industry is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. 2, Latin America and the Caribbean is one of the regions with the fastest aging population. In fact, we have the fastest aging population. So things like home care is going to be increasingly in demand. And there is all expectations that, emerging diseases like COVID are going to become more prevalent. And so we're going to have more pandemics. And fourthly, the Caribbean has a high chronic non-communicable disease profile. A large share of our population are suffering from these diseases, which are, in effect, lifestyle diseases, and so on. So after me goes up, the Minister of Health goes up, and he references what I say. He says, yes, this is why you young people need to invest in this, because there is an opportunity. So identifying the context and the opportunity is of utmost importance. If there is no opportunity, I always say, if when you're doing your SWOT analysis, I hope you know what a SWOT analysis is, where you identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you can only identify threats or challenges and you can't identify opportunities, then forget it. There's no business in this. All right? But identifying the opportunities is the most important area of research that you have to do in relation to your proposal. So that's why doing the market research. So I was able to, off the top of my head, because I know this stuff. I know what's happening in the health sector generally. So I was able to draw on that to identify the context opportunity. Next comes the ask. And you know what? This tends to be really hard for us in the Caribbean. When I was living in North America, North Americans know how to do this. In fact, they will give you the ask long before they identify what's the context or opportunity. Huh? But culturally, we in the Caribbean are not trained to be articulating our ask. And so that's why I put it in exclamation marks as well. How do you know what you want to ask for? And you have to be very, very precise. So it was funny when I was just about to come on the Zoom with you guys, and the parade was passing in front of our building from the political party that's just around the corner. That's the political party in power. My colleagues were saying, oh, let's go downstairs and tell them what we want. We want more subvention. One of my colleagues said, very specific. So the ask is a really important element. Then comes the final proposal, and the proposal is the ask, but now you are identifying some critical elements that would make the ask sound like both something that is desirable, attainable, and so on. And this is where our earlier discussion about things like smart objectives, return on investment, and so on, become really important along with the budget. So the proposal is really where you have all those things combined. So I hope you get the point for now. So let us skip to the next slide. So what I've done is identified 6 case studies, and we're going to break you all up into 6 groups, if I recall correctly, Marielle. So we have about 19 people. We could probably put, if my math is correct, 3 people in a group. But I'll just quickly describe the case. I'm not going to go into all the details. I've spelled out each of the 4 elements, but you are not restricted by it. These are really just guideposts. Right? The goal here is to get you started. Because what we want you to do is develop your proposal. So I'll show that in the last slide on the last 2 slides. So the visual artist, the case. The visual artist is a young emerging artist who has had 5 successful local and regional exhibitions and is keen to expand into international markets. All right. So again, this is not an artist who is now starting out. This is someone who has a bit of a track record, not a huge track record, but it's enough of a basis to, he probably has a good enough portfolio. He probably has some good contacts that he can draw on, he or she can draw on, has a sense of where the markets are, and so on. All right, so that's the visual artist. The second is the animator entrepreneur. Again, we know animation is becoming a really important area in the creative sector. In this case, the animator is based on a small Caribbean island and has trained and worked with some of the top industry locations in North America. He's the owner of a small studio that has a small staff, 4 people, and he's been doing subcontractual work. So, an interesting case study. So again, this person is not starting from scratch. They have some capabilities. They have an operation in place, and they're trying to expand. The third is the soca musician. The soca musician has had several breakaway hits in the carnival season, and he's built a good following at home and in the region and the diaspora. And in this case, he is looking to generate new income streams and so on. So again, in most of our countries that are listed here, we have either soca artists or reggae artists, zouk, kasa, kadans, you name it, right? So same principles apply. And there's a book publisher. Now this is where it changes a little bit. So we move away from being the first 3 were really artists, entrepreneurs. Now you have entities that can be defined more like executive producers. So they're not necessarily creating the content, but they are managing other people's content. So the book publisher has a small catalog of Caribbean authors who are trending on social media platforms, and he has been approached by an international distributor to do co-marketing. So very different hat from the first 3. Same with the film producer. And in this case, film producer has an impressive track record, maybe closer to more the artist entrepreneur type. And again, this person is trying to expand into new markets. Then you have the festival entrepreneur. He operates in a niche event in a small Caribbean mainland territory. And so for him or her, the issue is generating new income streams and that sort of thing. So those are the 6 case studies. We tried to cover as many sectors as possible, make it contemporary. Yeah, I think you get the point. But this is where your homework starts. So, worksheet 1, the winning proposal. At a minimum, your proposal should have these 4 things. You need to identify what your strategic objectives are, who are your target market stakeholders, benchmarks and targets, and then the resources, both human and financial. So let's start with strategic objectives. So let's take the soca musician. You know, carnival is in the air. What would be a strategic objective of a soca musician? You've already established yourself in the market. You're not the biggest artist, but you're somewhere in there. People know your name. Most artists of that type, their biggest challenge is stability. They want to be able to, you know, not just be depending on the big hit every year, because that you never know who's going to get a big hit. So, strategic objective would be to create a new sustainable source of income. I mean, who doesn't want that? We all want that. So that would be like strategic objective number 1. Another strategic objective might be to strengthen his brand beyond that of just being a soca musician. So maybe he wants to set up a label. Maybe he wants to branch out into other more lucrative areas or more stable areas of the music industry. So again, that's a really important strategic objective. And then for each of these strategic objectives, you then start going across and saying, well, who's the target market and who are the stakeholders? And one of the things that I try to do with people working in industry is say to them, your target market may not only be the final consumer. Let me say that again. Right? Your target market may not only be the final consumer. So let me give you an example. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the chairman of Caribbean Tales, and we've been running an incubator in Toronto for like 12 years, or even more actually. And I run this workshop with filmmakers, and I ask them the same question. So, who's your target market? And like rote learning, they all say, my target audience are young millennials in global cities who like romantic comedies. And I go, okay. But before you get to this target group, who do you need to convince that this is a worthwhile project to invest in? And then they step back and they say, oh, okay. So maybe I need to convince a distributor. Maybe I need to convince an executive producer who will finance the film. Maybe I need to convince, the person who is facilitating people's participation in a film festival so I could get some visibility. Right? And so the list of the so-called target market expands beyond the final consumer, right? So this is a really important area. I can't begin to tell you how important it is, because I often find that this is a thing that people are locked into. So, for example, if you're in the music business, many artists think about it, is that maybe you need to convince the people in the radio station, the DJs, to play your music. And that's why in the music industry, there's something called payola, right? Historically, recording companies would pay DJs to play certain songs on the radio station, to pump up that song, to pump up, to get some, get people are attuned to the song and the artist. Recording companies are also notorious for buying their own records. So put the records out for sale, and then they go and they buy it back so that the song moves up the charts. Once it moves up the charts, more people buy it. And then they put that music back into the market again to sell. All right. Yeah. So big companies do those kinds of things because they understand that your target market is not just the final consumer. Before you get the final consumer, you have to convince the record stores, you have to convince the people who do the charts, you have to convince a whole range of people. So you have to figure out who are all these stakeholders and what do you need from them to advance your interests, and how are you going to get it? And then benchmarks and targets. Very useful, very important. It comes back to the whole issue of what we called earlier smart objectives. So, how are you benchmarking what you're doing compared to somebody else in another jurisdiction or in your same market? If you're going to be making, okay, let's use soca musician as a good example. So I was having a chat with someone a couple of days ago, and they're saying, okay, so some of the top artists like Young Brother is doing like on a weekend, 15 to 20 venues a night. I'm like, wow, how do you do that? All right. So, so are you going to be competing with your Young Brother? Probably not. If you get to do 5 venues a night, then yeah. So you're in a different category. Your song is not as such a big hit. Then that's your benchmark. So you're aiming for 5 to 8 venues a night, and you're happy with that. All right. And then maybe your target market is a different target market from Young Brother. So corporate events maybe, as opposed to a big fete. So, and consequently, you have a different set of benchmarks, a different set of targets, and consequently a different set of resource requirements. Your marketing will be different, your branding will be different, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so at a maximum, we need you to identify 5 strategic objectives. At a minimum, 3. So it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So if you're able to identify 3 things and you're able to move across the log chart and really be very, very specific, kudos to you. All right. So this is a really important element in this exercise. In fact, it is the summary of the exercise. Then the next slide really tries to put things in some kind of time-bound perspective. That's one of the smart objectives. So one of the things you want to be able to say is that you can achieve a quick win within 3 to 6 months. Why is this important? It shows proof of concept. It shows that this is not some pie in the sky, that it is actually in the realm of the possible. That gives you the basis upon which you can then go market maybe another initiative or a wider initiative to a bigger client maybe. So you can show that you're not just walking with cap in hand, empty-handed. You are actually coming with something. Huh? So for example, one of the projects I was involved in, we went to meet with a corporate entity, and I mentioned how many eyeballs we had. Right? So I have data analytics from our website and so on. And I could even say where those eyeballs are, which jurisdictions, which markets, age profile, etc., etc. We got the money. We got the money because we were able to identify very specifically. And that allowed us to establish a quick win. And once we had that quick win, we were able to get even more investment as we proceeded. So it's really important to think through what are the low-hanging fruit that you can draw on. And then you talk about your medium term, 6 to 12 months, and then beyond that, after a year. Right? Now, in some businesses, anything under 6 months is really short term, because by the time it takes you to gear up and so on. But for most creative industries, firms, we could talk about a tighter or shorter time frame. Okay. I mean, for example, in academia, we have a business cycle that really runs a year. So if, for example, I want to offer a new course or program, it has to go through many hoops. It takes about close to 6 months to come up with a new program, advertise the program, and have it ready. So if I want to do something for September 2025, for example, I'm probably too late already. So that means I have to aim for September 2026, right? So every business has its business cycle. And so you have to understand that. So if you're doing stuff for Carnival, for example, well, you can't be dreaming up of some new costumes in October, November. You have to be doing that at latest June, July, or even earlier. Most of the big bands, for example, are launching in June, July, or even earlier now, right? So again, understanding the business model and the business cycle in which you're operating, again, very, very vital. So good. So your exercise is to fill out worksheet 1 and worksheet 2 as a group. And you have to identify which of these creative entrepreneurs role you're going to take on. So we're going to do some role playing in effect. And you're going to discuss with your colleagues or your group the case, the context, the ask, the proposal, sharpen it, come up quickly with your strategic objectives, and then start working across the thing. Now, it means then that you only have, maybe like a half an hour on a bit in this session. So what we're going to do is put you into groups very quickly, and then this will be your homework to work on as a group for the next tutorial session, which is carded for when. Can someone remind me, Marielle, or my brain is not remembering exactly the date, but I'm sure it's going to be communicated to you. So
7th of March.
7th of March. Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah. Can we break them into groups now?
That's good. Sophia will open the breakout rooms and persons can select which group they want to go into. So the rooms will be named based on the case studies.
So your homework, if we could call it that, is to start drilling down into your strategic objectives. Once you've articulated those, then you start moving across the log chart. So one of the groups I started off with, we were able to identify, like I think the animation group, 4 strategic objectives, and got it to the point where there was a level of precision. That's really important because you want to identify something that is measurable. So that's cool. Yeah, I think you guys have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of insights and expertise. Just use it. What I have done and what we are trying to do is just create this, I call it a mind frame, that helps you to put things in boxes, in specific boxes. Not to be boxed in by them, but it gives you that basis for then processing information really quickly. So you'd be able to spot a piece of information, and then you know exactly where to slot it in. And that helps when you come to do a pitch, when you come to finally do a full proposal. It just becomes that much easier because you know what to look for and you know where to put it. All right. But seems like you guys are well on your way. I will see you guys on March 7th at the same time, on the same device. So I wish you well, and make sure that you have your colleagues' details, contact details for each of the groups. And yeah, I'm looking forward to your presentations. So I was really surprised that no one took up that group. Maybe that's very interesting. Yeah, and there was a big number of people in book publishing. That was a bit surprising as well. So, but nonetheless, what I observed was that you guys are, I think you get it. The penny has dropped. And if not, you could still contact us, to get onto Mariel, to get onto Safia.